Hey, I'm Hunter from SkillThrive, and welcome to the first lesson in this three-part course where you'll design and code a simple About Me landing page. In this lesson, you'll design the About Me page using Figma, a free web-based prototyping software. Once you're done, you'll move on to writing the HTML in lesson 2. You'll also find all the lessons linked for this course in the description. Feel free to follow along and write the code as we go, but you can also download the final code and design on skillthrive.com for a small price. This helps me as a creator to continue making design and development courses for you to watch at no cost. With that covered, let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is head to figma.com and sign up for Figma. Now it's free to get started, and it's also, there's nothing for you to actually download because this is all web-based, which means you're going to be making the designs in your browser. Now they do have a dedicated Mac and Windows desktop app, but essentially this is just a quick way for you to access Figma, and it's going to act and respond just like it would as a web-based software. So it's still going to be, dependent on your internet connection and things like that. But it's just a little easier because it does live on your toolbar or your desktop, so it's easy to access. So you can see here the links are here for you to do that. And once you have that installed and you're signed up for Figma, the next thing we want to do is make sure that we have the Google fonts installed. Now, if you purchase the course files, I'll be sure to add those into the fonts folder. But if you don't want to purchase the course files, all you have to do is head into fonts.google.com and let's go ahead and just search for one of the fonts that we're going to be using in today's course, which is Work Sans. And you can see here that this comes up, and you can click here on the plus to add that to your selection. Then you can expand this, and then you can click here on this icon to download those font files so you can use them on your local computer. So the next thing you want to do is just go ahead and unzip this. Then you want to select your TTF files, just your TTF, there we go. And then double click and then install those. Now I'm not going to install that onto my computer because I already have these files installed. So I'm just going to go ahead and just delete what I just downloaded. And you would also repeat the same process with Open Sans. So you can come up here and type in Open Sans and click here to add that to your selection and just repeat that process of downloading that and installing it on your computer. So once you have those two fonts installed, you can actually start using Figma and following along. So let's go ahead and just open up Figma. So what we're going to do here is just create the MacBook Pro layout. And to get started, we need to be creating a frame or an artboard if you're used to calling that. And to access that, you can hit F on your keyboard, and just like in Sketch or in XD, you have these predefined layouts. And under the desktop, little tab here, you have the MacBook Pro. So if I click on that, you can see that Figma is going to create that artboard for me right out of the box. So let's go ahead and just reposition this somewhere like this so it's close to this design that I already finished. And what I'm going to do now is go ahead and put in the background image. Now this is the background image that we're going to be using in the course, but I'm just going to go ahead and bring in the raw file that I use. So I just downloaded these from Unsplash, and the reason I like these because it had the same girl in it, so it just felt consistent. So let's go ahead and just select these two images and then just bring those into Figma. So you can see they're way too big for the web, but we'll worry about that here in a second. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this one and just rename this to background. And then I'm just going to drag it over to the artboard. And you can see now that it's in the actual artboard. Then I can come to this corner, hold shift and scale that proportionally so it's the full width of that artboard. So I'm just going to zoom in here. And then I can just go ahead and center that background to something like that. Now, you've probably noticed already that this image is actually black and white, the one I'm going to be using for this design. And the reason I'm using black and white is because once I add this overlay, it's just going to make sure that it just takes on those colors. There's no colors from the actual image bleeding through. So in order to make that black and white, all you have to do is select that image, come over here to fill where it says image. You can click here and you have some basic adjustments that you can make. Now what I did is I just dropped the saturation all the way down, and then I just boosted the contrast a little bit so they're a little bit more punchier. The whites and black kind of stand out a little bit more. And that's basically everything I did there. And the next thing you want to do is just go ahead and add a new fill, which is going to be for our overlay. Now before I do that, I'm going to come into this one and make sure I just snag this hex code here. So you can see that hex code right there. Make sure I copy that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and to this image again, click here to add a new fill. And you can see that it adds a linear gradient out of the box. So I'm just going to click here to make some adjustments to this. And the first thing I'm going to do is just the position. I don't want it to go from top to bottom. I want it to go from left to right. So I can select this and just move it to the left of the artboard, and then select this point and move it to the right in the center. And then I can come into this first color and I can paste in that hex code and then set this hex code percentage or the opacity to 90%. Then I can come into this color and paste this same hex code in and then set that to 70%. And there we go. We have a simple little overlay design. So the next thing we want to do is let's go to just create this image. And to do that, I'm going to obviously use this other image here. And I'm just going to go ahead and just scale this down. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a square here that I'm going to be using as a mask. Now the size that I want to be creating is 526 pixels. So to create a square, we can just hit R on our keyboard, click, hold Shift, and then drag out to create a square. And then what we can do is just go ahead and just change this up here to the specific value we want, which is 526. And you can see once I changed that value that this one changed automatically because we have this icon right here, which is constrained proportions checked off. Now, if we didn't have that checked off, this one would have stayed at 400 or whatever it was, and then it would have turned into a rectangle. But because we want this to scale proportionally, we want to make sure that we have that checked when we made that change. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and just drag this image into the artboard here. And let's go ahead and just rename this to profile image. And let's go ahead and add this to just mask. Then we can select both of these layers, come up to this icon and click here to make that into a mask. So essentially all we're doing is using this shape or this square as a mask for this image. So what we can do now is come into this profile image and just kind of scale this down. So I'm going to hold Shift and just scale this into a spot that I like. So something like that I think looks good. And let's go ahead and just call this mask group profile. And then we can just center that and worry about the spacing here in just a second. So the next thing we want to do is just work on the content section here. And to do that, we need to be using the text tool. So I'm going to hit T on my keyboard to bring up the text tool, and then I'm just going to click in order to start writing some text. And I'm just going to write content marketer, which is just the title of her, her position or what she does for a living. And you can see here, if we come into this, the fonts that I'm going to be using is Open Sans, Bold, and 18. And I also added a little bit of letter spacing, which what that does is just kind of spaces out the spacing between each individual character. So let's go ahead and just do that really quick. So I'm going to change this to Open Sans. Change this to 18. And then change this to bold. Now another thing you can see here is that it's all caps. Now you could go through and type it in all caps, but a quicker and better way is to just come in to this icon here to your advanced type options. And then on transform, just click on this icon to force that to be uppercase. Now you can see too that we have a different color here. So let's come in and just copy this hex code. And then I'm just going to paste it here into the fill. Okay. So now that we have that, the next thing we want to do is just focus on like the header text, the hi, I am Jessica Lyons. So again, I'm going to hit T on my keyboard. I'm going to click and then say, just go ahead and write that out. So hi, I am, and then I'm going to hit enter to go to the next line, Jessica Lyons. And here we're going to be using the Work Sans font to a size of 72, and we're going to be using a different hex code. So while we're at it, let's just go ahead and just copy this color here for this hex code fill. And I'm going to just go ahead and change that. And then this is going to be Work Sans and actually I think the Work Sans Light. So let's go back and make sure that we select Work Sans Light. And the size was, let's see here, 72 pixels. So let's do 72. And let's go ahead and turn off that the uppercase. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is we need to come in and add some letter spacing here. So let's come back to this content marketer. And right here on this adjustment, we can add some letter spacing. And I'm just going to add about 10% spacing. So you can see how that kind of just is a little bit more spaced out now. So now that we have the header here, I'm going to make sure that this is capitalized. We can add this little accent mark here under Jessica. So to do that, we're just going to hit R on our keyboard to bring up the rectangle tool. And then I'm going to drag this out and then make it about 3 pixels. And the color that I'm going to use here is going to be this hex code. So I'm just going to copy this hex code, come back into this rectangle, and then paste that into the fill. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use an actual ruler here to make sure that this lines up to the Jessica. And to do that, you can come up to View and then make sure that you have Show Rulers checked. So if I check that off, you can see the rulers go away, and then come in and select that in order to bring the rulers in. In order to create a line here to use this, all you have to do is come in and drag down to the ruler. So if you want one that goes left to right, you would come up to this top one, and to get rid of it, you just drag it off. Now, if we want one to go up and down, so we'll come into this side, drag it to this point here on Jessica, and then create another one, whoops, and drag it to this point here. And then we can use this to actually reposition our rectangle. So let's make sure that the rectangle here lines up to that line, and that this one lines up to that one. Okay, so we don't actually need these anymore. So let's just going to just drag these off the screen. And I'm going to move this, let's see here, about 15 pixels maybe. So I'm just going to use my arrow keys and move that down. So this is 8, 10 looks good. Let's see how far I moved it down on this one. It looks like I moved it a little bit further, so 15. So use my arrow keys just to move that down 5 pixels. All right, so now we just have a couple more things to do, and that is the icon and then the information that corresponds to the icon. So we have Instagram and email. And to do this, I'm going to be using Font Awesome in the actual coding section. But for this section, I'm just going to be using a website called FA, or Font Awesome to PNG. So I'm going to head to my browser and then head to that website, FA2, the number 2, PNG.io. And we can come up here and search for what we want. So I'm going to search for Instagram. You can see here that we have that Instagram one. And then we can actually go ahead and change the hex code here to what we want. And the hex code that we want for this one is the same that we want for this. So I'm just going to copy this hex code, head back into the browser, and just paste that in. And 250 pixels is fine. And then we can click on Generate and then Download. So now that's downloaded. We can come in and do mail. So I'm going to type in mail, and we can select, I think it was this one, right? The outlined version. Same hex code. We want transparent, and 256 pixels is fine. And then we can download that. So let's come into the Finder now, and we can go ahead and just rename this to Instagram and then mail. So it's a little simpler and cleaner. And then I'm just going to take these two, drag it into my image folder, so it's not in my downloads folder. And then we can head back to Figma, and I'm going to bring in those two PNGs. So obviously they're way too big, and the size that we're going to be using here is going to be 25 pixels. So let's come in here, and we have the constraint on, and we can set that to 25. And then this one, I'm going to set this to 25 as well. Okay. And now let's go ahead and just kind of, left align this to this content. And it looks like they're not in the artboard right now. You can see that because they're outside. And that's why they weren't kind of left aligning. So let's make sure they're actually in this artboard by dragging them in. And now they're going to be able to reference those other layers, which you can see right there. All right, so now we need to go ahead and write the text for this. And to do that, I'm going to hit T again just to bring up the text tool. And I'm going to go ahead and just write, the Instagram handle, which would be Jessica_Lyons. And we can go ahead and we want to change this to actually keep it on Open Sans. And I think I'll use regular as well here. And the size is 18. So all of that is the same. We just need to change the color, and the color I'm going to set to this value here. So I'm going to come into the content marketer, copy this hex code, and then I'm just going to paste it here on the Jessica Lyons text. And let's go ahead and I'm going to select the Jessica Lyons in the Instagram tag or the Instagram icon. I'm going to come up here and click here to center those vertical. So it looks like they're actually already centered vertically. And then I can come in and select Jessica Lyons and move those about 15 pixels from each other. Now I'm actually holding Alt and Option in order to get that pixel spacing view. So that's what I'm doing here where it says 17, and then I know I can move that 2 more pixels. So 2 more clicks on my left arrow in order to get that to 15 pixels. So with this and this selected, I can Command G and just call this Instagram. So we know we have that in a group that's nice and organized. Then I'm going to come into Jessica Lyons and just copy that and then paste that here. And then we can select these two and Command G and just call this mail. And again, I'm going to select this text and I'm going to do jessica@jessicalyons.com. Select this layer, then select this one. So I'm holding Shift when I'm doing that. I'm selecting this, holding Shift, and then selecting this layer, which selects both of them. And then let's go ahead and center that vertically. So you can see how those centered vertically. And then let's go ahead and just select the name and then make sure that's 15 pixels. So it's 14, so we need 1 more to the right. Then we can select the mail and the Instagram and then center those vertically as well. And then with those still selected, we can Command G and just call this entire grouping social. So if we turn this on and off, you can see that our social grouping goes away. And let's go ahead and just make sure that that is left aligned. And the next thing I want to do is make sure that this is about 50 pixels away. So I'm going to just make sure that that's about 50 pixels. Actually, let's go ahead and do 60. There we go. So if we zoom out here, we can see that that's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and just group all of these together. So I'm going to select this, the rectangle, and the social, Command G, and just call this content. So now we can see that that grouping is nice and organized. So let's come into the content marketer, and it looks like I had this spaced out about 15 pixels. So let's come into this, and you can see that's 39. So I can hold Shift and arrow to move it 10 pixels at a time. So that's 29, 19, and then I'm going to release Shift and just move it down 4. So now you can see if I hold Option, I can see that that is now 15 pixels. On this one, we have it, I think, a little further down, and that's going to be 60 pixels from the rectangle. So I'm going to hold Shift and up, and then 4 to move it to 60 pixels. Then I can select this grouping, and let's go ahead and click here to center that vertically on the artboard, and let's go ahead and do the same here for this. So let's go ahead and make sure that's centered. All right, so now that that's centered, let's go ahead and make sure that this is, spaced out the same. So if we come in here and hold Option, we can see that that's 198 and then 140. So let's go ahead and just move this about 150. Let's do actually 160, and then do this one 160 as well. Then I can just go ahead and just select both of these groups, Command G, and just call this Jessica Lyons. So now that entire grouping is grouped together and nicely organized. Now there's one thing we still need to do here that I almost forgot because I've already done it in my own personal Figma file, but that is to take your images and make sure that they're ready for the web. And to do that, what I'm going to do is come down to our project here, and I'm going to select each image. So let's come in and expand the profile, and then this profile image, and I'm going to copy this, paste it, and then just drag it out here into this empty space. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my MacBook Pro here, and I'm going to come into this background, copy it, and just drag this out as well. And what I'm going to do here is go ahead and get rid of the linear fill, because we don't want that on there. We're going to actually add that in the CSS. And then what I want to do here is I want to scale this down to maybe like 600 pixels. So make that a little smaller because it doesn't need to be as big. And on this one, we can actually scale this down to something like 1200 pixels. So now that those are scaled down, what I can do is I can select both of these, come over to export, and then we're going to export this as a JPEG. Now, the reason we're not doing it as a PNG is that it's just unnecessary for this, and this file size is just going to be way too big. And JPEG makes a lot more sense here for images like this. So with those selected, we can come in and say export the 2 layers, and then we can save this wherever we want. So I can just go ahead and create a new folder here called images, and then export those right here. Now that you have those exported, there is one more thing that I want to do, and that is to run it through a program called Image Opt-in, which I'll link in the course files and the description. So let's head into the desktop, into images. We can select the 2 images, and after you download Image Opt-in, we can right-click, open with, and then select Image Opt-in. What this is going to do is it's going to help optimize the images, and you can see here that it's going to tell us how big the images are and then also how much we saved by running this through Image Opt-in. And now that we've optimized these images, we're ready to move on to the HTML section where we can actually start structuring our website. So with that said, I'll see you in the next video.